high-end conference room at Vanguard Capital gleamed with LED screens. Young CEO Clara Voss stood at the center of the table, smirking. "So you think you can teach me finance, janitor?" The entire board erupted in laughter. The man in cleaning uniform stood still, his eyes calm and steady. He set his mop aside and spoke softly but clearly. "No, ma'am, but I can teach you the cost of arrogance." No one was laughing anymore. A second later, the profit charts on screen suddenly flashed red, data lines plummeting straight down. The entire room fell silent. The man leaned over the keyboard, and the system began rebooting under an old login. N. Brandt, Chief Risk Unit. Meet Noah Brandt, 37 years old, single father, works as a janitor in a financial building. But 3 years ago, he was head of risk management at Vanguard Fund, fired after refusing to cover up fraudulent losses. Meet Clara Voss, 32 years old, new CEO, brilliant but arrogant, trusting data more than people. And meet Sophie, 8 years old. Every morning she draws charts and asks her dad, "Will the blue line go up today?" It was just another evening shift for Noah. He mopped the conference room floor while Clara addressed her team of analysts. Finance is about control. Emotion is noise. Noah smiled quietly. He'd heard that philosophy before. It never ended well. One of the analysts dropped some papers. Noah bent down to pick them up, glancing at the risk calculations. His trained eye immediately spotted the error, missing inverse notation in the variance formula. "Basic mistake." He spoke softly. "Excuse me, I think she forgot to multiply by variance squared. Anfornon." The entire room stopped. Clara looked down, saw he was right, but instead of thanking him, she laughed mockingly. "Thank you, janitor. Would you like to come up here and lecture us?" Chuckles rippled through the room. Noah simply said, "No, ma'am. I've taught enough for one lifetime." He continued mopping, unperturbed. Leon Graves, the CFO, whispered to a colleague, "That's Noah Brandt, the guy who exposed the Blackwell Fund. Now he mops floors to survive." Clara's laugh turned cold. "Perfect. A fallen man teaching risk. Irony sells itself." But then the presentation system started beeping. Error messages flashed across the screens. Noah looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You just entered positive values into a short fund model. It's going to reverse your entire portfolio." Clara snapped, "Be quiet. I know what I'm doing." "Ma'am, the algorithm is reading those inputs as—" "I said be quiet." Clara's voice echoed through the room. "Security, please escort this man out." 2 security guards stepped forward, but Noah held up his hand. "I'll finish cleaning and go, but you might want to check your overnight positions before the Asian markets open." More laughter from the analysts. Someone whispered, "Guy thinks he's still relevant." Noah gathered his cleaning supplies slowly, methodically. As he reached the door, he turned back one final time. "For what it's worth, your risk assessment model is the same one that nearly destroyed Lehman Brothers. The only difference is they had better janitors." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in nervous laughter. Clara's face flushed red. "Get out, now!" As Noah walked down the hallway, he could hear Clara addressing her team. "That man is exactly why emotion has no place in finance. Personal grudges cloud judgment." But Noah wasn't thinking about grudges. He was thinking about Sophie, waiting at home with her colored pencils and graph paper, drawing pictures of the money mountains that Daddy used to climb. He was thinking about how she'd asked him that morning, "Daddy, why do you clean floors when you're so good with numbers?" And he'd told her the same thing he told her every day. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the most important job is keeping things clean, even when other people make messes." Noah reached the elevator and pressed the button. Through the glass walls, he could see the conference room still lit up, Clara still gesturing at her charts, still believing she had everything under control. He checked his phone. Sophie's babysitter had sent a photo, his daughter asleep at the kitchen table, head resting on a math workbook, blue crayon still in her hand. Some things were worth more than being right, but that didn't mean he was wrong. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. Ever seen someone get laughed at just for telling the truth? And if you believe that sometimes silence is the greatest strength of all, remember to subscribe to see what happens when truth starts turning the tables. At 3:47 a.m., Noah's phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. He rolled over in bed, squinting at the screen. 15 missed calls from Vanguard Capital's emergency line. By the time he arrived at the building, chaos had already begun. The lobby was filled with panicked employees, security guards, and several people in expensive suits who looked like they hadn't slept. The elevator to the executive floor was packed with grim-faced board members. Noah rode up to the conference room, his janitor uniform a stark contrast to the sea of tailored suits around him. Through the glass walls, he could see Clara standing at the head of the table, her confident demeanor from yesterday completely shattered. The massive display screens showed nothing but red, cascading losses, margin calls, and system alerts flashing like emergency beacons. A long beep echoed through the room. Every asset chart on the main screen had turned red. 10 seconds later, system alerts blared. Data anomaly detected. Trading halted. Risk parameters exceeded. Shareholders were in full panic mode. Clara frantically pressed reset buttons, but nothing responded. Noah stood quietly by the door, watching. "You just let the model auto-trade with 100.1 leverage," he said calmly. "That's impossible. I locked the system." Clara's voice cracked with stress. "Unless the person who originally locked it was me." He walked to the terminal and entered a sequence of codes. The screen displayed, "Master Key, Noah Brandt, Risk Division, 2019. Clara went white. Leon Graves was sweating profusely. "That's impossible. I deleted all those permissions." Noah looked directly at him. "You deleted my name. You didn't delete my responsibility." The room erupted in confused shouting. Board members demanded explanations. Someone was screaming about lawsuits. Another person was already on the phone with lawyers. Noah quietly accessed the original risk models, restoring real data that had been hidden for months. The truth appeared on screen. The fund wasn't showing the reported profits. They were down $1.2 billion. Complete silence fell over the room. A senior board member shouted, "We've been lied to for 8 months?" Noah nodded. "I tried to warn everyone. The cost of arrogance is that truth always comes late." Clara stood in the middle of the room, her face pale, her voice hoarse. "What do you want?" "Nothing. I just clean things. Floors and books." But Noah wasn't done. He pulled up another screen, showing trading patterns from the past 6 months. "Your CFO has been using ghost algorithms to fabricate revenue. Every profit report you've seen was manufactured." Leon Graves backed toward the door. That's a lie. You have no proof." Noah opened his email archive on the big screen. Message after message between Leon and offshore accounts. Algorithm modifications and falsified reports. "I kept copies of everything before I was fired. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to ask the right questions." The board members were reading the emails in real time, their faces growing darker with each revelation. "Leon," Clara's voice was barely a whisper, "tell me this isn't real." But Leon was already gone, slipping out through the side door while everyone stared at the screens. Clara sank into a chair, staring at the evidence of massive fraud that had been happening right under her nose. "How long have you known?" "I suspected when I was fired. I confirmed it 6 months ago when I started seeing the same patterns in your quarterly reports." "Why didn't you expose this sooner?" Noah's expression softened slightly. "Because exposure without proof is just revenge. I needed evidence that would stand up in court and actually help the investors who are about to lose everything." A board member stood up. "Mr. Brandt, if what you're showing us is accurate, you've just saved this company from complete collapse." "No," Noah corrected. "I've just shown you the collapse that already happened. Leon was hiding it with fake numbers." Clara looked around the room at the faces of people who had trusted her leadership, who had invested their retirement funds and their children's college money in what they believed was a stable, profitable fund. "What happens now?" Noah started logging out of the system. "Now you decide whether you want to be the CEO who covered up the fraud or the CEO who exposed it. But the shareholders will lose everything. The shareholders already lost everything. Leon stole it months ago. The only question is whether you're going to help them get some of it back. He gathered his cleaning supplies and headed for the door. Wait, Clara called after him. I don't know how to fix this. Noah stopped and turned back. You fix it the same way you broke it, one honest decision at a time. But I need help. I need someone who understands. You need someone you can trust. And yesterday, you made it very clear that person isn't me. The conference room fell silent, except for the soft humming of the air conditioning system. Noah walked to the elevator, leaving behind a room full of people who were finally seeing the true cost of their arrogance. As the elevator doors closed, he could hear Clara's voice through the glass. Get me the SEC on the phone and find out where Leon Graves went. For the first time in months, someone at Vanguard Capital was asking the right questions. It was a start, 3 years earlier. Noah Brandt sat in this exact conference room, but everything was different. He wore a tailored suit instead of a janitor's uniform. His nameplate read Chief Risk Officer, and the people around the table actually listened when he spoke. The algorithm Leon is proposing will work short-term, Noah had said, pointing to projections on the screen. But it's built on manufactured volatility. When the market corrects, we'll lose everything. Leon Graves, then deputy CFO, smiled condescendingly. Noah, you're being overly cautious. This is how modern finance works. Modern finance that ignores risk isn't finance. It's gambling. The CEO at the time, Harold Voss, Clara's father, had supported Noah. I trust Noah's judgment. We don't implement anything without his approval. But Harold Voss died of a heart attack 6 months later. Leon was promoted to CFO, and Noah's warnings suddenly became obstacles to progress. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Leon accused Noah of leaking confidential trading strategies to competitors. The evidence was fabricated, but convincing. Noah was fired within a week, his reputation destroyed across the entire financial sector. His wife, Sarah, couldn't handle the stress of the scandal. The constant media attention, the frozen bank accounts, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. She had a stroke 3 months after Noah was fired and died in the hospital, holding his hand in Sophie's tiny fingers. Noah had 2 choices: fight a legal battle that would take years and bankrupt him, or disappear and focus on the only thing that mattered: raising his daughter. He chose Sophie. Now back in the present, Noah was in his apartment, making breakfast while Sophie got ready for school. Daddy, she said, coloring a new chart at the kitchen table. The blue line went down yesterday, didn't it? How did you know? Because you came home with that quiet face, the same face you had when Mommy went to heaven. Noah knelt down beside her chair. Sometimes his 8-year-old daughter understood things that escaped Harvard MBAs. The blue line did go down, but sometimes that has to happen before it can go up the right way. Sophie nodded seriously and added a green line to her chart. For hope? For hope. Noah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. CV. An hour later, Clara Voss stood in Noah's modest living room, looking completely out of place among the second-hand furniture and Sophie's artwork covering the walls. Your father built a good company, Noah said, offering her coffee from a mismatched mug. Before you destroyed it? Before Leon destroyed it using my firing as cover. Clara sat down heavily. The SEC investigators want to know why you never came forward with evidence. I did come forward 3 years ago. Your father's death meant my warnings died with him. But you kept the evidence. I kept everything. Every email, every algorithm modification, every fake report. Not for revenge, for protection. Clara pulled out her phone and showed him news headlines. Vanguard Capital fraud exposed. CEO reveals billion-dollar cover-up. Finance industry rocked by whistleblower scandal. The media is calling you a hero, she said. The media doesn't know I exist, and I want to keep it that way. But you saved thousands of investors. You prevented a complete collapse. Noah looked at Sophie's drawings on the wall. Stick figures of a man in a suit, then the same man in work clothes, always with a little girl holding his hand. I didn't save anyone. I just stopped lying. Clara was quiet for a moment. The board wants to offer you Leon's job, CFO position, full restoration of your reputation. And what do you want? I want to understand how my father's company became a criminal enterprise without me knowing. Noah walked to the window, looking out at the playground where Sophie would play after school. Your father trusted the wrong person, and when good people die, bad people see opportunity. Leon started the fraud right after Dad died? Leon started planning the fraud the day your father hired me. I was the only person who could expose him, so he made sure I couldn't. Clara's voice grew smaller. By destroying your life. By betting I wouldn't sacrifice my daughter's stability for corporate justice. Noah turned back to her. He was right, but you're sacrificing it now. No, now I'm teaching my daughter that some lies are too big to ignore. Clara stood up, pacing the small room. The investigators say Leon moved over $800 million to offshore accounts. He's probably in a non-extradition country by now. Probably. Well, now, Warren, you're okay with that? Noah picked up one of Sophie's crayons and added a small mark to her chart, a tiny dot of blue at the very bottom of the graph. Clara, your father once told me that the market always corrects itself. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes years, but eventually, truth wins. That sounds naive. That sounds like faith. Clara looked around the apartment again, at the careful organization of a single father's life, at the evidence that someone could lose everything and still choose hope. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. They want you there. To do what? To explain how we move forward, how we rebuild trust, how we make sure this never happens again. Noah set down the crayon and looked at her directly. I'll come to the meeting, but not to take a job. Then why? To teach you something your father tried to teach me. The hardest part of finance isn't managing money. It's managing the people who manage money. Clara headed for the door, then stopped. Noah, why did you really keep those files? For 3 years, you could have destroyed Leon any time. Noah glanced at Sophie's latest drawing, a man cleaning floors while a little girl watches, both of them smiling. Because I wanted my daughter to see that doing the right thing isn't about timing. It's about character. And if I hadn't humiliated you yesterday, then Leon would still be stealing money, and you'd still be believing his lies. Clara opened the door, then looked back one more time. Maybe arrogance has a cost, but so does pride. Yes, Noah agreed. The difference is, pride costs you something. Arrogance costs everyone else. After she left, Sophie emerged from her bedroom where she'd been getting ready for school. Daddy, was that the mean lady from your work? That was someone learning to be less mean. Sophie nodded and picked up her backpack. Good. Maybe now she can learn to draw better charts. Sometimes 8-year-olds saw the world more clearly than anyone. The headlines exploded across financial news. Vanguard's CEO exposes billion-dollar fraud. Young executive saves investors from collapse. Finance industry stunned by corporate honesty. But when reporters asked Clara who was behind the investigation, she gave them a different story. A maintenance worker taught me that cleaning isn't just about floors. Sometimes you have to clean the books too. The media ate it up. Clara Voss became the face of corporate integrity, the young CEO who chose truth over profit. What they didn't know was that she hadn't slept in 3 days. Leon Graves had been arrested trying to board a private jet to the Cayman Islands. The FBI found evidence of the largest corporate fraud in financial sector history. Over $400 million was recovered from offshore accounts. But Clara knew the real story. That evening, she found Noah in the parking garage where he worked his night shift, cleaning the cars of executives who made more in bonuses than he made in 5 years. You could have destroyed me too, she said, approaching his cleaning cart. Noah looked up from polishing a Mercedes. Why would I do that? Because I humiliated you. Because I called you a janitor like it was an insult. Because I laughed when you tried to help. You did all those things, Noah agreed. But you also called the SEC. You chose truth over covering up the mess. Clara pulled out an envelope. The board voted. They want to offer you Leon's position as CFO. Noah continued cleaning the car. I already told you. Full restoration of your reputation. Your wife's medical bills paid retroactively. Sophie's college fund fully endowed. and a public apology from the company for wrongful termination. Noah stopped polishing and looked at her. And what do you want in return? I want you to teach me how to be the kind of CEO my father was. Your father wasn't perfect, Clara. He trusted the wrong person too. But he trusted you, and you never betrayed that trust, even when it cost you everything. Noah sat down on a concrete barrier, suddenly looking exhausted. Do you know what Sophie asked me this morning? Clara shook her head. She asked if Daddy was going back to wearing suits, because she likes me better in my work clothes. Why? Because when I wore suits, I came home angry. When I wear these clothes, I come home grateful. Clara sat down beside him, her expensive heels clicking against the concrete. The investors want to sue for damages. They want someone to blame, someone to hate. And I told them the only person responsible for fixing this mess is me. Noah studied her face. That's going to cost you personally. Everything costs something. You taught me that. A security guard walked by, nodding respectfully to Noah. Evening, Mr. Brandt. Sophie's drawing is up in the lobby. Real pretty. After the guard passed, Clara asked, She draws pictures for the building? Every week. The security guards hang them up. They say it brightens the place. What does she draw? Usually charts. Sometimes her daddy cleaning things. Always with a smile. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Noah, what if I don't take the insurance money? What if I use it to create a whistleblower protection fund instead? That's your choice. What would your father think? My father was a factory worker. He taught me that honest work is never beneath you, but dishonest work always is. Clara stood up, smoothing her skirt. The board meeting is tomorrow at 9. Will you be there? To turn down the job again? To help me understand what kind of leader actually deserves to sit in my father's chair. Noah returned to polishing the car. Clara, you want to know the difference between your father and Leon? What? Your father asked questions when he didn't understand something. Leon made assumptions when he didn't want to understand something. And me? You're learning the difference. The next morning, the Vanguard Capital boardroom was packed with investors, media, and federal investigators. Clara stood at the head of the table where her father once sat, where she had mocked a janitor just days before. Before we begin, she announced, I want to introduce someone. The doors opened and Noah walked in. Not in a janitor's uniform, but not in a suit either. He wore clean khakis and a simple button-down shirt, the kind of clothes a man wears when he's comfortable with who he is. This is Noah Brandt. 3 years ago, we fired him for doing his job too well. Yesterday, he saved this company from complete collapse. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mr. Brandt has declined our offer to return as CFO. Shatter, more murmurs, confused now. Instead, he's agreed to serve as our chief ethics officer, a new position, with one simple responsibility, to make sure we never confuse profit with purpose again. Noah stepped forward and spoke into the microphone. I'm not here to manage money. I'm here to make sure the people who manage money remember who they're managing it for. He looked around the room at faces of board members, investors, and reporters. Finance isn't about numbers on a screen. It's about the single mother investing her savings for her children's future. It's about the retired teacher who trusted us with his pension. It's about people who believe that honest work should be rewarded with honest returns. The room was completely silent. My 8-year-old daughter draws charts every week, and every week she asks me the same question. Will the blue line go up, Daddy? Noah smiled slightly. From now on, I'm going to make sure I can always tell her yes, because we're doing the right thing.
Late afternoon. Noah and Sophie sat in their favorite small cafe, she working on homework while he reviewed ethics guidelines for the new corporate board. Sophie was writing an essay assignment. What does your dad do for work? She read aloud. My daddy teaches people about money. But what I remember most is, Daddy cleans floors, but keeps his heart cleaner. Noah smiled, gently retying her hair with a blue ribbon. The TV on the wall was broadcasting financial news. Vanguard Capital appoints ethics-based board. Clara was giving an interview. Finance isn't about numbers, it's about people. And it starts with one janitor who remembered what integrity costs. The camera showed the new company slogan on Vanguard's building. Where trust is our true asset. Noah and Sophie looked up at the screen, the light reflecting in their coffee cups. On Sophie's homework paper, she had written in careful handwriting, "Teach me finance, Dad." And underneath, Noah had written back, "I'll start with honesty." The news segment continued with footage of Leon Graves being led away in handcuffs, followed by interviews with investors whose retirement funds had been saved. "Daddy," Sophie asked, still coloring her charts, "will you wear suits to work now?" "Sometimes, but I'll always come home the same way." "Happy?" "Grateful." Sophie nodded and added a new line to her chart, this one pointing steadily upward in bright green. "What's the green line for?" Noah asked. "For when people tell the truth, it always goes up." On the TV, Clara was answering a reporter's final question. "What's the most important lesson you've learned as CEO?" "That wisdom can make people rich, but character makes them worth trusting. When someone gets laughed at for being too honest, remember, truth only needs time to win." Noah gathered their things as Sophie packed her backpack. Through the cafe window, they could see the Vanguard building in the distance, its windows reflecting the setting sun. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Ready, Daddy." As they walked out together, Sophie's small hand in his, Noah thought about the blue ribbons that had become symbols throughout the company, reminders that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest meaning. The camera pulled back to show father and daughter walking down the street, the financial district behind them, but their focus entirely on each other and the simple promise that tomorrow's blue line would go up for all the right reasons. Wisdom can make people rich, but character makes them worth trusting. When someone gets laughed at for being too honest, remember, truth only needs time to win. Where are you watching from? Which moment gave you chills? When he said, "I can teach you the cost of arrogance," or when the CEO tearfully called him someone who keeps his heart cleaner than floors? Leave your comments below. And if you believe that honor can't be bought with money, hit subscribe to Hero Dad Stories, where we tell stories of ordinary fathers who make the whole world go silent.